Kdenlive is an incredibly powerful free open source editing software, and today we're going to learn the basics of editing and color grading to get you making amazing videos and making them fast. Let's dive in. To download Kdenlive, we can go to kdenlive.org or follow the link in the description. We'll select download, then choose the installer for your system. And once that finishes, you can run through the installation like normal and open the software from there. Now, when you first open Kdenlive, you may get a notification about hardware optimization. You can always reach that menu from the settings, run config wizard, and basically all this is just to make sure that your GPU drivers or everything and codecs are updated and working properly. So we'll go ahead and hit OK, and we'll start with the project bin because this is where all of your files and folders will be imported and stored inside of your project. And the easiest way to import is just to go into your File Explorer or Finder and click and drag the folder into the project bin. And what's nice about clicking and dragging this folder is that if you have a dedicated folder structure and you have subsequent folders inside, Kdenlive will automatically import those folders if it detects media inside of those folders, which is really nice to have. For now, we're just going to use some basic folders, so I'll go ahead and delete those for now. And I'm just going to go ahead and import music and some B-roll into here. Now, if we wanted to create additional folders inside our project bin, we can always right-click, select Create Folder. I'm just going to make one called Titles for now. Now, if you import your media and you get a notification asking if you want to change your profile settings, usually that's a good idea to do if your project settings doesn't match your footage that you're importing. So you can do that and it'll update this project setting automatically, or you can go to your project settings, and then change your project profile from here manually. Now my files are 4K UHD and 23.98 frames per second, so I'm just going to switch that manually and we'll be good to go. And we got the notification saying that it changed, and we have our project settings matching our footage. So now let's go ahead and actually look at some of our footage. If I start playing this back, you'll notice that the playback is very, very choppy. It's not really playing back smoothly at all. Lags quite a bit. And the reason for that is because these files are very hard for the software to play back. Now we can fix this in the form of proxies. Now there are two different types of proxies, but the type we're focusing on today is the type that makes it really easy to edit. So let's go ahead and go back into your project settings, and then we'll go to this proxy tab. And the things we want to make sure we have checked are proxy clips, generate for videos larger than, and then we can just set our size to 1 pixel so that we can generate proxies for all of our videos inside of our folder. We can specify the size of the proxy video, and then we set our encoding profile. Now this is the key part that makes our proxies work well. In this menu we have a lot of different options here, but the type that we really want to use is ProRes. And by default it uses the proxy version of ProRes, so it's the lowest file size possible for ProRes. But this type of codec will make it very, very easy for your editing software to play back the files because every single frame is encoded individually. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. And if you want to make this a standard for all of your projects that you open, you can go to your settings, configure Kdenlive, and then go to proxy clips and just make sure the options are the same. And then hit apply and then select OK. And then to make sure that we actually generate our proxies, we can highlight all of our clips, right-click them, and make sure proxy clip is checked. And that'll generate the proxy files, and you'll see a P show up whenever the proxies are created. So now if we start playing back this file, it may look slightly worse quality and lower resolution, but it plays back super seamlessly, and when you go to export, it'll automatically relink the original files, or if we want to toggle them off if we're doing any color grading or any sort of effects work, we can always go back and toggle that individual proxy clip off and see our original clip again. So we'll go ahead and toggle that back on for now. So let's go ahead and actually import these files into our timeline here. So we'll start with this first one. And if I import this, you'll see that we have our playhead, which determines what this viewer is looking at. And you'll notice we have two different viewers here. So we have our project viewer and the clip viewer. The project viewer is showing whatever the timeline sees. The clip monitor is for viewing whatever clips are in your project bin. So in this clip monitor, you can do things like setting in and out points, so you don't have to import the entire clip into the timeline. We can just find a point where we want to start the clip, press I to set an in point, go to the end of where we want it to, hit O for out point, and then we can just click and drag that into our timeline as well. And now it's a shortened version of the clip, so we don't have to chop the ends off in the timeline. You can also hover over this and drag video only into the timeline, or you can drag the audio only into the timeline. And then to highlight clips in the timeline, you can hold Shift, click and drag, and then whatever your mouse hovers over will highlight all of your clips that it selects. And then we can just go ahead and delete these for now by pressing delete. So let's just go ahead and import the last 3 clips here by clicking on this one and shift clicking the last one to highlight all 3 of them. And now I'll just click and drag this into the timeline, and now all of our clips are in our timeline. Now to navigate the timeline, we can scroll out by holding Control and scrolling up and down, and that will scroll towards the mouse, wherever the mouse is located. Or you can just scroll up and down to scroll left and right in the timeline. Or you can middle mouse click and hold and drag, and that will fine-tune your left and right scroll. Now to do some basic trimming on these clips, if we hover a mouse over the beginning or end of the clip, you'll see that we have the mouse change and highlighted colors to show that we're on the edge of the clip. So if we click and drag this, we can see that we're just trimming the beginning and not moving anything else on the timeline. If we go over to the end, we can do the same thing with the end of the clip to trim that part as well. There's additional tools like your ripple tool, and the ripple tool allows you to trim the beginning or end of a clip while moving everything ahead of that point on the same track along with it to keep your edits and gaps the same. And we can see on this next clip, if we start dragging the end of it back, it pulls the rest of the clips back with it. Likewise, if we trim the beginning of the clip, it'll keep the edit point there while pulling the end of the clip and everything else ahead of it back with it. We also have this slip tool where if we wanted to choose a different part of this clip to use without moving anything in the timeline, we can just click and hold on our clip, and now we see the full range of the clip that we have, and we can look at our project monitor to see what frame we're starting on and what frame we're ending on. So we can just start it right as she starts walking here and end on a good frame at the end. So then we have this spacer tool. Now what the spacer tool does is anywhere you click the mouse, it'll highlight everything ahead of it in the timeline. So you can bring this back and close in any gaps. Now let's go back to the selection tool, and let's say we want to make a cut in our clip. Let's go ahead and go over to this one over here and find a place where we want to cut, and then press Shift R, and that'll make a cut on our clip itself. So we can just go ahead and delete this one by pressing delete. Or if we want to automatically close that gap without having to go to the spacer and click and drag, I'll just go ahead and undo that. We can highlight this and then press Shift Delete, and that'll automatically close the gap when it's cut. Now let's just say we had another clip on the top layer here and we wanted to only cut one of them. Whichever one is highlighted, if we do the Shift R shortcut, it'll only cut what's highlighted. But let's just say we wanted to cut everything under the playhead, we can press Control Shift R, and that'll cut everything under the playhead regardless of what's highlighted. And so I'll go ahead and move this back for now. Now, instead of clicking and dragging edges, we can also use the Shift 9 and Shift 0 shortcuts, or basically the parentheses shortcuts. So we can go to this point in the clip and maybe we want to end it here. We can press Shift 0 and that will trim the end of the clip to the playhead. Or we can go to the beginning of this and then press Shift 9, and that'll trim the beginning of the clip to the playhead. Now there's an additional thing that we can do with those shortcuts. If we switch our tool to the ripple tool and do those same shortcuts, so now if we do Shift 9, instead of just a trim, it'll ripple trim the clip. And then the same thing goes for at the end. If we use Shift 0, it'll pull everything ahead of it to the playhead. So those are some basic cutting tools. Now let's go ahead and add a couple more things just to showcase this a little bit more in detail. I'm going to go ahead and make another cut right here just for fun. And let's say I wanted to add a transition to these pieces. Well, we can go to compositions, and I'm just going to add a simple dissolve for now, but we can go ahead and click and drag this and hover over our clip here. And now if we zoom in, we've added a transition to these clips, and it dissolves from one to the other. And then we can click on this transition, and then we have our effect composition window over here where we can specify what types of parameters we want this to have, and we can move its position like so. Now, alternatively, instead of using transitions in this way, I'm going to go ahead and scroll out a bit. Let's say we had a clip on top and we wanted to do a transition this way. Well, we can use a different composition mode. So let's go ahead and bring that dissolve back in. And now we see we can actually place this on a track. And if we go ahead and switch our tool back over to the selection mode, we can go into the dissolve, and our adjustments are slightly different here, but essentially the result is effectively the same where we're getting this dissolve from one to another. But this is a good way to do different types of compositing mappings. And now let's go ahead and scroll out once again. And let's say we wanted to add some text onto here, but we wanted to add it in a layer above our footage. Well, let's go back to our project bin here, and I'm going to close this B-roll. And we don't have any titles in here, but we can easily create one in this tab here. And this tab allows us to add additional color clips, folders, different titles, templates, animations, and generators. A lot of stuff you can do in here, but we're just going to add some basic text for now. So I'm going to go ahead into the title clip, and I'm not going to go into super detail about all of this, but the basic thing we'll do is just click inside of this text box, and we're just going to type in some text. Yay! And maybe I'll resize it a little bit, maybe make this 250. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the center buttons and then hit create title. And now we actually have a title. And then I can just click and drag and throw this into the folder to keep it organized. And now I could just throw it into the timeline like so, but maybe I want it to go above this point and I need some extra space. Well, we can create additional tracks by right-clicking in the track area and selecting Insert Track. And then we can specify how many tracks we want to add, if we want it to go above or under whatever tracks we're selecting here. So we can go ahead and hit OK. And now we have 2 additional tracks, and we can easily put our text above everything else to keep it organized. Now, the last thing I want to show in the timeline is about grouping. Now, all of these clips have some camera audio that is completely useless to us. Now, there's a couple ways we can deal with this. Right now, all of our clips have this blue outline on them showing that they are grouped, and you'll notice that whenever you click one, it highlights both the audio and video. You can also just press and hold Alt and select one or the other, and that way you can individually select them and move them around. But another way we can do it is by selecting them, right-clicking, and going to ungroup clips. And now you'll see that there's a black outline on them because now they're individual clips and not bound together. But you can always regroup them by shift-clicking them or shift-dragging and highlighting them, and then right-clicking and selecting group clips. And now they're bound together again. So because we don't need any of this audio, I can just highlight all of my clips right here, right-clicking and selecting ungroup. And now I can just shift drag and select all of my audio and then go ahead and delete them. And because I don't have any more audio in here, I can go ahead and add some music in here. And let's just find some music. I'm just going to drag this one in here, and I'm just going to align it with the beginning of this clip. And I'm going to scroll ahead and maybe have some fade off over here. And so maybe I want this one to fade out at the end, or maybe we have some text at the end to fade us out. So we can go ahead and just make a cut here by pressing Shift R. We'll just go ahead and delete the rest of this. And then we have this little circle on this top right corner. If we click and drag this, it'll automatically fade this music out. So now if we play this back, the music automatically fades out for us, which is really nice. And then in order to make sure the text doesn't just pop off the screen like that, we can also do the same thing with the text and have a video fade on it as well. So now the text fades out smoothly and the music fades out smoothly. So by now I'm sure you've noticed that our clips look a little bit flat, and that's because they're completely ungraded and they were also shot in log, which our monitors can't even show properly. So we're not going to go too deep into the log specifics today, but we are going to go into some color to see how we can improve the look of these clips and some techniques that we can use. Now, before we go into the color tab, we want to make sure that we turn off our proxies so that we're working with full resolution footage when we actually go to color. So let's go ahead and just highlight all of our clips and turn off proxy clip for each of them. And now let's go ahead and go over to our color page. And now we're working with full resolution footage and we're on the color page. And to find all of the effects that we can use for color, we'll go to the effects tab and make sure we pull down color and image correction. And this is where all of your color grading and color correction tools will live. Now, because this is log footage, we don't want to make adjustments directly to this log state because it'll actually provide incorrect adjustments and skew the footage in ways it wasn't meant to be handled. So we can solve this really quickly by using the apply LUT option. Depending on what camera you have, you might have different options for LUTs, but for this, we're just going to use a simple technical LUT to transform from its log state to Rec. 709. And the LUT file we're going to apply is probably going to look different for you, but mine's a F-Log clip from Fujifilm, so I'm just going to apply that. And you can see all we're really doing is taking it from the color space it was shot in to Rec. 709, which is the color space that most monitors use. And we're keeping the flat log look too, but now with correct colors. So now let's actually look at our tools that we can use. So we'll start with the exposure. I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag this on here. And sure enough, when we increase and decrease our exposure, you'll see that it is in fact moving our overall brightness up and down. And our radius, if we increase it, will decrease the black level, and decreasing radius will bring our black level up. So that's just nice to have. But the thing you have to be careful of with the exposure is that it's really easy to push it too high to the point where it starts clipping your color channels really hard. You can see it flatlines up here and we get all these white spots and it's just really messy. So in general, you want to be very soft with this exposure and use it only for extreme circumstances where you want to maintain contrast. But I'm just going to go ahead and remove the exposure for now, and I'm going to look at the other one that I use, which is the gamma. So I'm going to go ahead and apply this here, and by default it's going to maximize it, which is not what we want. But the key thing I want you to notice with the image and the waveforms is that while I move this, you'll notice that it doesn't clip our colors whenever we increase it. It gives a nice roll off. So this is actually a good tool to use as your base essentially for where you want your base exposure to be applied. Now there are a lot of other tools that you can use for exposure, but this is the primary one that gives me the most optimal result without destroying the image too much. So now we're going to look at our white balance here. We can go down to the bottom where we have our two different white balance adjustments. So I'll just go ahead and add them both. And I'm actually not going to adjust this quite yet because we want to define our contrast first. So if we go up, you'll see that we do have a contrast adjustment, but I'm actually going to use the Bezier curves for this. So let's go ahead and drag Bezier curves on it. And what this will allow us to do is define our contrast from a curve. And so we have our black end here and our white end up here. And so we can just click and drag this low end down to bring the shadows down lower. And then we can flatten out this black point here. And then with our high end, we can straighten out this area and just bring this up and bring a nice round curve. Or we can just add another point and really define that S curve. So with this S curve, we have a really big body of a contrast. You can see that's already doing a ton to our image. So if we turn this on and off, you can see that that really fills in everything quite nicely. And we can do a little bit more with this if we wanted to raise our black end, but still have a nice defined look. We can easily do that here, which is nice. Now with the white balance, let's go ahead and close this up to give us more room. With our white balance adjustments, let's go ahead and enable both of those. The regular white balance is more actually for your green magenta shift. So you can click and drag this back, and let's say we want to get rid of some of that green cast, so we can bring it down to shift it more towards magenta. And then maybe it's a little bit too warm in the overall image, so we can go to the white balance LMS and then bring our color temperature up to kind of neutralize those skin tones and give a more natural looking image. Now, when you're adjusting white balance, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it's best to prioritize your skin tones. And the best way to do that is actually by using the Vectorscope. Now, if you've never used the Vectorscope before, this is basically just showing how saturated your colors are at any given color vector. So you have your red, your yellow, your green, cyan, blue, and magenta. And these waves and data points down here are just showing where all of your colors are shifting towards. And obviously in this image, there's a lot of yellow and green. So we're seeing a lot of those yellow and green shifts. If I cranked this color temperature all the way up, you can see how it starts moving down towards cyan, or if I cranked it all the way down, you'd see, oh, we got a lot of red in our image for some reason. We don't want that. But we're just going to go ahead and stick with this area for now. And you can see with those two white balance adjustments, we've already gotten rid of a lot of that green cast, and the image looks a lot more natural. And now the last thing I want to talk about is in terms of saturation. Now, saturation isn't necessarily one of the 3 cores, but something relatively problematic about how saturation is usually used, whether it's the normal saturation effect or something like hue, saturation, intensity. When you increase saturation using these tools, they make your colors brighter, which can make your clip feel very digital or video-y. Now, it isn't inherently wrong, but it's the opposite of how colors behave in real life. For example, when something gets more colorful, naturally it will become darker. Now, fortunately, we do have a way to accomplish this here. We can actually use another Bezier curves adjustment, surprisingly enough. So let's go ahead and add a new Bezier curve to our flow here. And we're just going to change this channel to saturation. So if we grab our upper handle here and start dragging it to the left to increase our curve, you'll see that not only is our image getting more saturated, but all of our waves and our color channels are all going down, meaning our colors are actually getting darker. So this is actually a more filmic type of saturation, and you can have a lot of fun with this because you can really shape your saturation in a way where if you have colors that are just way too blown out, but you want to maintain a lot of the colors in the more subdued areas, we can actually bring this high end down and decrease the max saturations, but also increase the lower saturations. So we can bring a lot more body into some of the skin tone areas and take away some of the green in a lot of this forest area. So if we look at this before and after, we're bringing a lot more color and life into the skin while keeping the background subdued. And those are just some quick color correction and color grading tips. Hopefully those were helpful. If you want to copy those effects and place them on other clips, we can just right click, hit copy on this clip, and then highlight our other clips, and then right click and then select paste effects. And now all of our clips have those same adjustments. Now those adjustments might not play the same for every clip because every clip is a slightly different scenario. But the good news is because we have our layers built out like so, we can go into each one of them because we know what they are. And let's just say this one obviously needs some exposure. So we just want to increase this gamma. And that gets us to a much closer spot very quickly. And then we can do other things like building our contrast curve differently or moving our white balance differently, giving this more of a magenta shift, like so. And there's more that we can do with this, but let's just go ahead and see how we can actually export our video and get it out. So let's go ahead and just go back to editing. Let's say this video is in a done spot. Well, we can go to the beginning of this clip over here. We'll press I for in, and that sets our in zone. And then we can just click and drag, and we can make sure this snaps to where the ending of this music is right here, and that'll snap to the edge. And we'll just make sure that this is actually snapped onto the beginning here. And then this is our zone that we're going to send to render. And the easy way to render is just by going up to Project, Render, and then we can specify what type of exporting we want. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this MP4 H265. If you want to see more on different rendering types or different tips and tricks for this, let me know. But we're going to go ahead and just specify where we want this to go. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in its correct folder. We'll give it a name, and then we'll hit save. And then we select render to file, and that'll put it in the job queue. Now, the great thing about this is we can go ahead and continue doing other work or working in different sequences. And if we wanted to send other things into the job queue, we can do that while it's rendering. So if I set another file to render, let's just say this is Forest V2, we can hit render to file, and now it'll also render that clip when it's done rendering the first one. And that's how you edit a video in Kdenlive. What's a tool you would like to master next? Audio, effects, subtitles, or graphics? Or is there something in this tutorial that you would like to dive into deeper? Let us know any of these things and if this tutorial was helpful for you in the comments below. Okay then, that's it. Nope, that was a bad one.